All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of our RecNet Hotline. It is the month of April. Some of us are coming off of spring break. Some of us are right in the middle of spring break, but we're excited to connect once again and talk about real world best practices with rec leaders for rec leaders. So for today's session, we have the Resort Experience Director from Westgate River Ranch, Mr. Rafael Ortiz on the line, and he will serve as our guest speaker for the few subjects that we have in mind. If anybody's new here, this is how it works, and it's very simple. This hotline is basically like a radio style show. So we're going to be picking Rafael's brain on a few different topics relevant to operations, leadership, and more within the world of recreation. But at any moment, aka after some of the questions I start off with, you all can be able to call in by just raising your hand or throwing a question in the chat. So we'll be able to pick Raphael or myself's brain on whatever you may like to know. So while yes, we do have some topics in mind for today's session, this session is overall just designed for rec leaders by rec leaders. So if your question happens to not be about the topic, please feel free to still chime on in. Now, Raphael, thank you very much for being our guest speaker today. We're so excited to have you. I want to start off by, of course, giving our audience a little bit of a background on who you are, what you do, and what property you represent. So if you would like to be our guest and introduce yourself.
No, of course. So first and foremost, thank you, Justin, for such an amazing introduction. I myself have been here at Westgate Resorts for over about 5 to 6 years. I went up the ladder all the way from a lifeguard to what we call here a lead guard. Shortly after that, moved on to a supervisor position within the water park over in International Drive. Right after that, I took my talents over to our corporate offices where I was a learning and development junior operations trainer. During that time, got promoted to an operations trainer on a regional level. So I was going ahead around all of Orlando. I went Florida, actually assisting this property that I'm currently at as well right now. And then shortly after that, my love for the operations really took a hold of me. I was a little bit on the younger side at the time, and I was like, you know what? Let me kick back my career right back at the operations. So I went over. They were just starting a new initiative in Westgate where they were trying to go away from our activities program to a resort experience program. So I was actually the first ever resort experience manager over at a lakes property to then get promoted over to the River Ranch property as a resort experience and water park manager. And about a month ago, just got promoted to the resort experience director here at Westgate River Ranch and Rodeo. And if you know anything about Westgate River Ranch and Rodeo, it's basically as if you're walking into a Western film. There's all from cowboys. We have rodeos every single Saturday. One of the biggest rodeos in Florida. And here in this position right now, I oversee the water park operations from pool attendants all the way to lifeguards, our adventure park operations that are basically attraction facilitators, as well as our pool attendants and adventure park attendants within that realm, and then our entertainment programming, which is basically we have resort experience hosts that go around the property and they do whether it's bingo nights, whether it's line dancing, and they just create an experience that is more able to be facilitated around the property. So that's a little bit of my history with the property and the company and currently where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you very much for sharing all of that about yourself. And what a journey. Congratulations on your new role. Excited to hear all about it. And for those listening, as Rafael explained best, Westgate River Ranch is such a unique destination, right? It's far beyond the traditional resort in, let's say, Orlando, Florida, and it really navigates such a unique destination. So you oversee a lot, and it's an exciting ride. Now, one of the topics I want to jump into, and I'm so excited to be able to pick your brain on the unique destination you oversee, is talking about retention. And then we're also going to talk about burnout in the same way. We are just coming out of spring break. It is a busy season, not only for the management teams, but also for our teams alike. And with that, when the going gets tough, sometimes our team morale drops, sometimes the performance drops, etc. So we want to hear from you on how you can really navigate those challenges while reaching that culture of success. So the first question we want to throw your way, Raf, is relevant to just retention. What are some strategies that you take to retain your quote unquote top talent?
So for me, right, I give them purpose over task, right? In a resort setting, we're just running around, and I give them the expectations that it's not just about cleaning or just scanning your pool, right? You guys are memory makers, so making them understand the why, right? I'm a big person. That's the why. Yes, I am your leader, and yes, I'm going to lead you to purpose and lead you to success. But I want you to understand as to why you're doing these things, right? So simple as just having that flexibility and visibility with them regarding knowing their names, right? So getting to know them by name, your team members, or knowing their goals. So why are they here, right? How can their personal goals at the end of the day be in contact with their also departmental goals, and then showing them the path as to how they're going to get there. So just taking that personal approach of basically giving them a purpose over just like, hey, this is the task of your roles and this is how you complete it, giving them the reason as to why we're here and how they do it.
Wonderful, yeah. And I really love that answer. It starts off with, creating that culture of communication where the team understands the why. And I think you said it best there. Now, before we jump over towards burnout more specifically, I want to talk a little bit about just turnover and teams being disconnected. So, this is so important for people listening and for the viewers that will listen later, especially someone who is new to leadership, to be able to identify what you're about to say next. But more so, how do you, or what are some early signs that you can tell, okay, this team member is starting to disengage? Maybe they're on their way out and turnover is near. What are some early signs that you can tell us a little bit about that?
So this one I actually even taken as far as looking back at myself, right? Where was there signs of myself where I was disengaged in past roles or past jobs? So I really just look at my team members and look at those shifts, those I like to call them the discretionary shifts, which is those slight shifts in behavior where you see perhaps maybe a proactive team member, they stop offering these ideas, or they shift from saying we to they or their team or that team over there, right? Instead of taking that ownership of, hey, this is us. What I like to do with them is that as soon as I see those shifts in behavior, I like to do a stay interview, which is a little bit, well, it's completely the opposite of an exit interview, right? We do a stay interview, which is for me, here on this property, we utilize a lot of golf carts. So it's taking them on a golf cart ride or taking them on a little walkthrough, and then essentially get to know, hey, I've noticed these little changes in behavior. Can you please explain to me why they're happening, right? But not doing it from an outcome of like, I need them to change right away. Just truly going back to my first point earlier is getting to know the why. You know, you'd be surprised during these conversations with the team members. I've had team members that in my head I'm like, oh, I think it's not going to work. I think perhaps maybe they're already seeking for another role. And as soon as I do these little stay interviews, that's when I started noticing that all they needed was a conversation, right? Perhaps there's things at home that's getting carried over to their work environment, or vice versa. Maybe something that could just be talked. You'd be surprised what a conversation and a personal conversation can really just do.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. And what a wonderful answer as you answered the next follow-up question I had, which is how do you act on seeing those early signs? And I love the fact of a stay interview, and I think our audience is really going to be able to take that and run with it. Now, running away from retention and turnover, right? A big part of it is developing the culture within, right? And making sure that you can foster an environment that people want to be a part of. So they don't even think about leaving. And, from having the opportunity to work with you for some time now, I think you've done a phenomenal job on this next part. And I would love to have your input shared with the audience on how do you not only create a culture of success that is fun and exciting, but is a culture where people, aka team members, take ownership and take initiative versus just following directions. Because we know as leaders, yes, you can say, hey, can you push in those chairs? Can you retrieve the towels? Can you do this? But a great culture is when your team has already taken ownership of those. And I think you did a wonderful job of developing that at the ranch. So talk to us a little bit about how you got there.
Yeah. Ownership really just comes hand in hand with trust, right? I feel like as leaders, sometimes we feel like we have to know it all. So we start giving all these random solutions to all our supervisors or even our lead guards or the leads in the departments. and really just getting to sit down with them and trusting them, right? Saying, hey, how would you handle this situation? And that itself, just simple, that sentence itself, how would you handle this, goes a long way, because you start seeing those manuals start working on their brains, and then you see the engine start going, and they feel like, oh, my my leader trusts me, right? And they start taking ownership over programs. It's happened more than usual right now, where I simply, before I even go quick into the solution, I already know the answer, but a little bit of psychology comes into place here, right? You make them, you get your answer by just making it part of their answer. So you start feeding an idea, you start feeding, hey, how would you handle this in this way? Or, okay, and then let's say perhaps they answer with something that is completely off the park, and you're like, oh, that's not perhaps the answer I'm looking for. You start asking them in the sense of, okay, but do you think that if we handled it this way, and you give them an example and just making it part of their thought process, that itself has worked so much for me to creating ownership, because it really just starts making the team like, oh, well, my own director or my own manager or my own supervisor is really taking the time to ask me how I would handle this. And that itself, it's worked really wonders for me in my past.
Awesome. No, yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing just that. Now, to put a quick pause on the few questions I have set for you, we received a question in the hotline. So I would love to go ahead and pick your brain on the question that we received from Taylor, which states, with talent acquisition, what are some red flags that you look for on a resume that would make it clear they are not a good fit for your team?
So I look a lot, I'm a firm believer, right, of not perhaps staying in a role for too long, but sometimes seeing not staying at a property or a company for too long, right? When you start seeing these shifts, like just the other day, we had a team member that was applying for a manager role, and at every single job that they were at, they were there no more than 9 months. And as soon as I see 9 months here, 6 months here, 5 months here, 9 months here, 6 months here, and in a span of 3 years, you've had about work for 7 different businesses, right? That doesn't stop me from having that personal conversation with them upon an interview, but it does start waving the red flag of, maybe there's something that's happened, right? What is it that perhaps is stepping them away from not staying in a consistent job? And that's where I start shifting my questions in the interview process to be more so, hey, why did you move to so many different properties or too many different
Yeah.
companies in the span of 3 years? And that's usually where I get my answers of like, sometimes it's for valuable reasons, perhaps, right? They're moving from different countries or anything like that. But most of the time, as soon as I see that on a resume, 9 times out of 10 is usually, oh, I didn't like policies that were being told to me in that job place, or I didn't like the way that some things were handled. And then that's when it starts creating that red flag-ish
Yeah.
sort of situation.
No, exactly. And I think you answered that so well. A key component that I would always share is some, let's be honest, some people are not too good at developing their resumes, right? So while yes, there may be some red flags that appear on the resume, I think it's so essential to still have that initial call. You don't have to bring them in for an interview, but do the
Yeah.
pre-screening and check it out for yourself. And then through the interview is where you get to be honest, as you mentioned, and ask those questions that may seem to be alarming for based off of the resume. Thank you, Salil, for saying that in the hotline. And please, for our audience, do not hesitate to keep on adding some more in. Now, Rafael, diving right on towards the topic of burnout again. We just came out of spring break, so this is so, so important and close to our hearts in this moment now. But I want to learn more about how you keep your team energized and how you keep your team going, motivated, inspired when they're working crazy events, maybe crazy hours, and the going's getting tough.
No, of course. I think it goes back to recognition, right? A lot of us sometimes get in the habit of recognizing the team after the fact, or perhaps after a big win, right? Like we just came out of spring break over in our side, and not waiting till the 2 weeks that it took, or not waiting till an activity is fully over, a whole entire month is over, to celebrate the team and explain to them and express how great they did. For me, I have a group chat for my teams, right? Whether it is my leadership team or the operational individual contributors. And anytime that I see something that stands out to me, whether it is hosted activity or perhaps the way that they were scanning at a pool, just dropping it in the chat as soon as the thought comes to mind, right? Because as a leader, a lot of the times we look at great talent and we're like, yes, I want to recognize this person. And recognizing it, it doesn't mean just going ahead out of your way and creating a huge, big pizza party or perhaps making them employee of the month. Sometimes it's just a simple, hey, you're doing a great job. Hey, I see you. So the way that I do that is just dropping a quick little message on the group chat and shouting someone out, right? Especially also as well on our pre-shifts and post-shifts, right? I try to join them as much as possible before our department starts with their day or as soon as it ends with their day, and start recognizing the team members on a day-to-day basis. A lot of times, right? A lot of team members might just be like, "Oh, this guy's just always thinking that everybody's doing a good job," right? But if someone's doing a consistent good job, it's always great to recognize that because I feel like as leaders, we tend to always recognize when someone's doing something negative, and we try to coach them up in that sense. But also understanding that we got to take time of our days to go ahead and recognize when someone's doing well. And as well as leaders, we get busy, right? Probably your general manager calls you over for a meeting or you have another meeting with corporate right away. So what's worked for me best is as soon as I see that talent doing a great job, I keep them energized by just celebrating the micro wins. That's what I like to say.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, no, thank you for answering just like that. I think it's so important to provide those positive recognitions in the moment, right then and there, as the team is so prone to recognize those areas of opportunity. Now, this next question, which is the last question on the topic of burnout,
Mhm.
and it comes from a student, a part of our organization, who's working as a entry-level supervisor role, and they've recognized this as a common trend that negatively impacts their team. And the question goes, how do you normalize conversations around burnout without lowering performance standards? Now,
No.
before you answer, I do want to give some context to this. Whereas traditionally, it's commonly known sometimes when the going gets tough, whether it's short staffing or just a long period, the standards may disappear. And the team or some leaders may be okay with, hey, let's just figure it out. Let's just get it done. It's okay. Yeah, we want it this way, but we just have to make it work, right? So the question here is, how do you navigate those conversations without lowering the performance standards?
No, of course. I mean, like you mentioned, right? It starts by normalizing it. Burnout, it's going to happen. It's hospitality at the end of the day. It's a resort. If you don't get burnt out at a certain time during your career, right? That's probably maybe you're great at it, right? But essentially, what I like to frame it is just as maintenance. I have a conversation with the team members and just tell them that anytime we're having those burnout moments, just to be completely and utterly honest and just truly just tell me like, hey, I'm having a maintenance issue, right? Which is just like a tractor or like a pool pump at our pools, right? They need service to run at a peak performance. And us humans, we need that preventative maintenance as well. That way we can stay to a high performance. So I just tell them like, hey, let's have a conversation, whether it's with myself or the manager, and just tell us like, hey, I need a preventative maintenance. Not necessarily, pushing it to tell them, hey, burnout, perhaps that not normalizing bad work, but being truthful enough to say, hey, I feel like the last couple of weeks have taken a toll on me mentally, and normalizing that conversation and making it seem like it's okay because a lot of team members they think that whenever they feel overwhelmed or perhaps they feel like the job is getting to them, that if they voice that to a leader, we're going to take it as, oh, they're not fit for the role, right? But the culture that I like to tell my team members is like, no, I want to be part of those conversations, just as long as we're not having that conversation every single 2 days. But every now and then it's going to happen where we're going to need those moments. So that's how I try to normalize it. Just saying that burnout is just maintenance work that we need to conduct, and I'm pretty open to have those conversations with them because again we're humans, right? And we're not computers that if we were, a lot of the job would get done. So
Oh, yes. No, and thank you very much for sharing your insights on burnout and retention overall. I think the audience watching today and also watching ahead in the future will be able to resonate with those answers. Next topic that I want to jump on is a topic that was recommended from a few different members of our association. And it's actually one of our first time speaking on it here on the hotline, which is talking all about corporate groups and group sales, right? More so on the recreation side of things. And your property is super unique to having many different types of large corporate operations come on by and they want to have a good retreat with you, right? So I want to break down a few different questions to pick your brain on how you make sure the corporate experience is through the roof when it comes to groups visiting you. Now, the number one, first question is going to be when designing experience for corporate groups, right? More so whether you're designing a one-off unique experience or you're designing an experience that you will add to your portfolio for groups to select. How do you work? How do you and your team work to make sure that it's intentional rather than offering a basic whatever it may be?
Yeah, so back in my introduction, I had talked about activities versus resort experience. So this one kind of correlates with it, right? So I try to move away from the activity side of it all and just shift it over to like a narrative, right? We don't here at the property we have beautiful stories to tell. Our narrative is amazing because we are in a Western theme property, right? Where, for example, we have one of our activities that's a hayride, right? So how we tell a narrative through that is that we start talking about the land, we start talking about the animals. So I intentionally find the details around my property and try to go ahead and move away from it just being like a fast forward activity and show them kind of like the narrative that is around the resort, right? We also customize the experiences by every single person. So when they book a hayride, we give them a welcome note and it's signed by leaders that they probably don't even know who they are, but we make that experience as intentional as possible, just to be personal as possible, right?
Oh
We
yeah.
want to make sure that as a company, our company, our whole mission statement is all about loving what you do, who you do it with, who you do it for. So intentionality plays a big portion into that.
Oh yeah. Now, I want to pick your brain as this hotline is designed to make sure that we get some real insight, right? So you have a lot of experience with working with group sales.
Mhm.
I want to hear what do you think is one mistake that you see resorts make when they're trying to elevate their group experience?
I would say over programming. A lot of times we overstack an activities itinerary, thinking that a group needs to be entertained right away just by going back to back to back to back. But also understanding that we can do a lot during those gap sessions, right? So like learning how to schedule activities and programs in a way that gives people space to connect. I've realized that a lot of the hosted activities that we've done at this resort are really the ones where we host the activity, but also let the group bond with each other. So really just not overpacking a let's say like a group inquiry with just trying to get as many activities right away, but also leaving that space for them to really just connect because that's what they're
Yeah,
paying for, right? At the end of the day,
most
they're paying.
certainly. Yeah. I think the cool part when it comes to group sales is every company has a different goal and mission when they decide to book their retreat, right? You have a fun, unique resort where they already know they're heading over to a Western style ranch resort, but their goal may be to realign, it may be to disconnect, it may be to learn more leadership. So it is pretty challenging on the experience side on how you can take an experience, an activity, and make sure the goal is aligning with their learning objectives for their outing. Now, let's have some fun here. So, talk to us a little bit about a success story, whether it's a really cool event, an event that went wrong, and then you turned it right when it comes to group sales at your property.
I think for me, we have an event called S'mores of Course, right? It's a event where we give them s'mores, of course, and they pour their choices of bourbon, right? And a lot of people love it because you are by a fire pit, you're roasting your marshmallows, and we're pouring little shot glasses of bourbon, and then we start explaining to them what is the history besides that bourbon, right? Where does it come from? How was it crafted, and so on. So we had this group event where there was a group of people that came in, and I had the team train to the T. Right, we trained how where the bourbon came from. We became from not knowing anything about bourbon to becoming bourbon experts. So we overtrained, and when the time came, we started engaging with this group, and they were just talking over each other. Right, they were talking over each other while the host was trying to go ahead and explain the bourbon. You can see the team member getting a little bit irritated because again, this person trained so much on how to pour the bourbon or where the bourbon came from, just in case people had questions. But the group itself they were just caring so much more about just bonding with each other and really just getting to roast some marshmallows in a fire pit, which understandably so, and then drinking. So what we did was we upped the music, we turned it all around, and instead of it just being kind of like a learning about the bourbon, it was just mostly about, hey, here you go, try this one, moving up to the next one. And we just really just stepped away from what was originally just structured to just more fluid, right? A lot of times, rather than seeing something so structured just being turned away by our guests can be a little bit infuriating because we're like, we put so much time and effort into this, but understanding the beauty on the madness, right? Which is our line of work, hospitality, and truly understanding that sometimes when things don't go our way, that's a blessing as well, right? Because in this time, now for next event, this team member is completely knowledgeable about this bourbon and about this Morgan Force. But in this case scenario, right, the team wanted more the bonding experience rather than the facilitating experience. So we took that as a blessing, right? So not much. So I didn't save the day there, but I was able to talk to the team member and really just escalate it down and understanding like, hey, look at the beauty in just us just letting them be, right? They paid for this experience, so they get to choose how they want to do this experience.
No, yeah, for sure. And thank you so much for sharing that story. It definitely is a highlight. I love the moments where we have to pivot and it gets a little chaotic, and then you're able to recognize or sit back for a moment and see the guests are still having a good time. And at the end of the day, that is our goal, right? So before we shift away from group sales, I do want to pick your brain a little bit on, let's say there's a resort out there that does not have a group sales program and they're thinking about it. Where, or in your opinion, where should they start in a sense of experience standpoint? What should be their first experience that they program and say, hey, let's try to offer this to corporate groups who decide to stay at our resort?
Just start with that signature moment, right? I would say go around your resort, do a tour around your resort. What makes your resort stand out, right? I sound like a broken disc when I talk about the Western theme, but for us, one thing that stands out is that we've run the largest rodeo in Florida, right? Every Saturday, we have over 2,000 and 3,000 people come into this rodeo. But how else can we go ahead and make a group sales activity based out of that, right? Perhaps doing like a private rodeo. So what stands out from us is that, right? For us, it's the rodeo. The rodeo is our biggest thing. So we can build an entire experience around that. So what I would suggest to anyone with a resort is to really just, whether it is asking your own guests and saying like, hey, what stands out from our resort? The team members or even yourself, if you already have that moment in your that activity or that placement or location in your resort that stands out, how can we go ahead, right? Whether it is that you have one of the largest fire pits, right, in the resort, how can we make an activity out of that and really create something that it's worth purchasing or buying?
Yeah, no, awesome. Thank you very much for adding that. I'm sure those watching and watching later on will be able to resonate, and hopefully someone can learn from just that. Now, as we get ready for the second half of the call, we have two more topics before we get to open up the hotline. And the next topic, we're going to go right to the basics, right to the heart of our whole department. We're going to talk about operations and execution. So, the first question that we have, and this question is another one that came in from one of our members, it states, what daily habits or routines have you believed made the biggest impact on the way leaders can be effective?
Something that, and this is actually not even my ideology, this is something that I took from one of my past leaders in the past, was the first 15 minutes of my shift, right? A lot of times I used to shift myself. I used to come into work and I would just go straight to my computer and just straight to tackle all the long emails that I get. But what I really truly found that worked best with the culture within my team and just with like operational excellence was spending those first 15 minutes of my shift outside of the team, right? So for me, it works beautifully because my operations open at 10 a.m., but I have my team members scheduled at 9:30. So what I like to do is those 15 minutes of the from 9:30 to 9:45 is really just be outside and join their pre-shifts, right? Have those face moments with my team. And that really just shows the people that they come first and the operations come first. And then right after that, I go into my office and obviously tackle all the different items I have to do on the admin side.
Awesome, exciting. And now this question is going to kind of shift towards leadership, but also within operations. And it's very important as it's a common challenge for a lot of emerging professionals. And it states, how do you ensure consistency inside of operations when you personally can't physically be everywhere?
So funny enough, right, just going based back to when I was an individual contributor, I would always hear the words SOP everywhere, right? I would be like, what is a SOP? And for me, when I grew as a leader, I started understanding why they exist, right? And it's standard operating procedure. They're here for a reason, and they show us the why systems are in place, the why safety protocols are in place. And as long as the team understands the why, everything else just follows along, right? Because if you look at our operations, someone at one point came into this role or came into this department and starting stating, all right, we're going to start doing this because this is the why of this became to be. So just really just making sure that you have those SOPs in place from the littlest thing on how to dispose of garbage or how to dispose of dirty towels and where do you take that linen after it. And I promise you that as long as you, one, create it, execute it, and train it, it's going to be done whether you're there or not. Because that's something that I learned right on when I started having issues as to, oh, I feel like I have to be there at all times because the team doesn't understand it. What I did was just really just put what's up here on paper and make it formulated in a way that the team is able to read it and understand the why.
Amazing. Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. I think it's so important to have standards in place. Right. If everyone tries to just figure it out all the time, eventually the ship is going to sink. So having those standard operating procedures and more so training and educating the team on the why behind it is so important. So I think you hit that one right on the head. Now, earlier on the call, to circle back, you talked a lot about trust when it comes to creating that culture of success. And as we talk a lot about operations now, I want to learn more so how you hold your team accountable, but still be able to make sure that that trust is there and they feel happy to be on the team. So talk to us a little bit about how you do that.
So what I like to do is just I give them a high challenge and I give them a high support, right? So essentially, how I trust my team is really by knowing that I gave them the tools necessary to complete the task that I've been, assigning to them. I try my hardest. There's some times where, of course, they have to do a little bit of the sort of learning, but anytime that I give someone a task, especially right now, I just gained an admin in my role, right? So there's a lot of things where I task them with things that perhaps someone else that isn't another role would never understand. But as long as I go ahead and going back to the SOPs or going back to manuals, right? I give them the tools necessary to complete it. And obviously, I put these people and trust these people that they're in their roles for a reason. And as long as I give them the tools necessary to complete the task, that's how I build my trust with my team. And I keep them accountable. By giving those deadlines and due times of like, hey, so this is due by this date. However, before you get there, I want you to learn on this manual, page 17 through 20, and this will teach you how to get to the goal that I'm setting, right? So I'm not giving them word by word how to do it, but I'm giving them the tools necessary to do it. And that's how I build that trust within the team because I don't ever want them to feel like I'm pushing them and stepping them into every single position, but just giving them the tools necessary to get to those positions. And that not
Yeah,
only creates
no.
trust, but accountability.
Exciting. And thank you very much for sharing a little bit about that. That's awesome, man. Now, when it comes to communicating, right, whether it's a standard or just clear expectations for the operation at large, it's easier said than done, right? It's easy for anyone to say, "Hey, we expect you guys to wear red and not blue shirts," right? But how do you communicate in a way that truly sticks to the team to where you're seeing the team is understanding you and it's actually getting done in operations?
Yeah. Back to my past leaders. There was this director that I had that he would use the rule of three, and it was as simple as saying it in a huddle. You post it on a schedule, or you can demonstrate it in person, right? So when you're talking about saying in a huddle, using your post shifts and pre shifts, if you do conduct those in your department, as a time to go ahead and give that communication. Then right after that, if you have a channel, right, whether it's a Teams channel or you have a group chat, just posting it there as well, and then following up in person on their next shifts by showing it in action, whether it is a new way of doing things or perhaps it is a new for us, right? Like just right now, we are transferring over to a new wristband. So I announced it on our pre-shows. I posted it on our group chat. And then now tomorrow, I have a meeting with all of them in the morning to show them how the wristbands look and how they can best put it on the guest. So the rule of three has really worked for me in that sense.
Oh, amazing. That's awesome. And I love that strategy there. Now, as we get to navigate away from operations and talk more on the leadership mindset of things for our last topic, what I do want to say is just a reminder for everyone on the call for the hotline, while we are asking Raphael many different topics and questions, feel free to call in at any moment, whether it's through the chat or a hand raise, so we can actually have you say your question and pick Raphael's brain as the hotline's purpose is for rec leaders by rec leaders designed to talk about real world best practices. So if you happen to have any question or challenge that you're going through and you just want to get some extra insight, even if it's not on the topic we're talking about, please do not hesitate to raise your hand or type the question in the chat. But as we dive into one of our final topics, which is leadership mindset, to start off fresh, what is a belief about leadership that you have recognized this is how I want to lead my team? This is a motto I want to share. This is a quote I want to have them lead by. Talk to us a little bit about that leadership belief that resonates with you.
Um, for me, a leadership belief that has resonated with me, right? I feel like growing into my role, I felt that I had to know all the answers. And especially as a young leader, right? And recently stepping into a new role, I started realizing that that's not the case. It's not about knowing all the answers, but knowing who to ask or asking the right questions. And that is something, a motto or a sentence that I tell my team. You don't need to have all the questions or all the answers, but you need to go ahead and know who to ask these right questions, right? I'm dealing a lot with systems in IT. I don't know a lot about IT, but I know who to go ahead and ask. So as long as the answer is not a no or I don't know, I feel like that's something that has been really just changing my belief, which is just understanding that I don't have to have all the questions at all times, but I do know, I am expected to know how to ask the right questions.
Oh, nice. Exciting, exciting. And I love that you were able to answer that question and talk to us a little bit about how that's helped you change over time. As I'm confident that's going to be able to resonate with a lot of our folks on here. Now, what's one piece of advice that you think you would give to someone who's stepping into a role where they are now the head of department? Maybe not director, but they have people underneath them that they're responsible for and they're in charge of said operation.
Funny enough, I was having a conversation with just a team member right now who is in the process of perhaps joining us as a manager, and they were giving us a question of, how would I gain the team members' respect, right? And what I told them is simply just listening to them. A lot of times when people get into new roles, they think that within the first 30 days, they have to change everything and put their stamp on everything because now they're a leader. But realistically, that's how you lose people. That's how you lose that rapport between them, right? Because during the first 30 days, they're going to look at you as, all right, let's see how this person is in that new role, and let's see how they're going to lead us moving forward. So what I like to say is you go into the dirt level, how I like to call it, right? You go to the reality of how your team's day goes day by day. What does the operations feel like? For example, for myself, one of the things I'm dealing with right now is our waiver program. So we have these waivers that the guests have to fill out prior to entering to our attractions. And at first, I was just like, oh, it's as simple as doing this, right? But it really took for me to get into the line level to really just start filling out these waivers with the guests to understand, oh, wow, the system is glitching. At this time, it takes 5 minutes for the system to actually show their waiver and to verify that it's actually checked. So that would have never happened if I would have just gone with the expectation of, oh, I know it already. I know it's as simple as doing this or as simple as showing hospitality. But just truly just listening to the team and not only just listening, right? Just getting to experience that face to face with the reality of what they deal with the operations on a day to day.
Oh yeah. Now, Regna at large, and me personally, we're all big believers that leaders should never stop learning, right? Learning is the key to success. And just how you mentioned, you're never going to know it all. So it's important to keep on being a sponge and retaining as much insight as you possibly can. So I want to ask you, how do you continue to grow as a leader yourself that allows you to help lead your operations?
So in the beginning of this introduction, right, I mentioned that I come from our corporate offices here at Westgate Learning and Development. In a program that they had within all the team members was the 10% rule, which was as simple as 10% of your week, you utilize some time to go ahead and really just get that self-led um, knowledge or personal growth, right? Whether it was that for the first 10 to 30 minutes of your shift, you're watching a TED talk on a specific area of your role or a specific area of your job that you want to grow within, right? And just like this right now, this right here, it doesn't bring anything to the operations of Westgate right now, but I know it brings something personal for my growth that eventually it's full circle and it goes back to the operations here at the ranch, right? So just taking those times, whether it's 45 minutes, an hour of your week, and then just doing some self-led just a course. It could be a book. It could be anything that you feel like you need a little bit of sharpening your sword. For me, it's been finances, right? So taking the time to, even with your own property, what I've done recently is that what I use my 10% rule for myself is that I visit my accounting department and I sit down with them and I get to see what it is to deal with numbers for about 45 minutes. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you guys do this for 40 hours a week? So something as simple as just taking that little small time of your busy schedule, whether you want to do it at your job or you want to do it at home, and truly just gaining something that will, be for you personal, but at the end of the day goes to the big goal of what it is that you're working for.
Nice. No, yeah. And thank you very much for sharing that. Now, as we get to end off on the call, I do want to say we already touched a little bit about on some advice you would give to someone who is stepping into a role of leadership. Now, more so, let's talk about, for the final question, let's talk about some students that we have. Some students who are getting ready to graduate and they're not quite sure what they want to dabble into next. What would be some advice you would like to give to a student who's seeking to start their summer internship within recreation or jump into a potential leadership opportunity within recreation, whether it's at a summer camp, hospitality, hotel, etc.? What's some advice you would give to a student who would like to explore a career within rec?
Justin, I'm so sorry. Wait, hold up. There you go. Repeat that question one more
No
time. I'm
worries, no worries. Yeah. So
sorry.
we talked a little bit about your advice that you would give to a new leader, but let's talk about what advice you would give to a student who is undecisive and is thinking, maybe I should start a career within recreation.
Well, it's as simple as just for me, it was trying it out, right? I myself, being completely honest, I never saw myself in hospitality. I was the type of person that I wanted to go more into the movie and film industry, whether it was the camera work or directing, certain just the movie process, right? I went to Full Sail, and what I found most innovating for me was that I was given the opportunity to join in as a lifeguard, and somewhere across the line, that lifeguard role turned into endless possibilities to where I'm at currently, right? Just giving it a try and trying to see how hospitality fits with your own internal goals. Like for me, filming and entertainment has been a big thing. And even in everything that I do currently, I can see how basically in my role, I'm building a stage, I'm building and operating scripts, right? It's all about formatting the way that you look at things. So just trying it out and seeing if it goes with your future goals. And if it doesn't, then at least you tried it, right? Hospitality is something that you can find a lot of different things, a lot of different joys. And whether it is, right, for someone that loves financing, accounting is right around the corner. For someone that loves the kitchen, loves that high paced environment, food and beverages around the corner. So hospitality has a lot to offer. And just understanding that, just giving it that initial try. For me, that's what I would recommend. And just try it out, give it a chance, and You never know if you might be like me, right? Where I generally thought that what I would enjoy the most would just be that film industry. And then I found myself leading operations, and now I have a love for the operations to where I love developing teams. I love the just the production value of our activities that we host here at the ranch. So that would be the best advice I would give.
Awesome. Yeah, no. Well, Rafael, before we end off, we will open up the hotline one last time for any of our viewers here live to be able to ask you any final questions, picking your brain as a rec leader so they can be able to get some insight or reassurance. So for those listening, if you want to unmute and ask a question, be our guest, or you can add it in the group chat. But while we wait for any hands to raise, I do want to thank you very much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to connect with you here on the hotline and pick your brain as our special guest. So thank you so much for your time. Let's see if we have any callers to come on in. Andrew went into the chat. Andrew says, "What is your favorite interview question to ask candidates?"
Um, Feedback, right? How do you like your feedback being given to you? I feel like that itself tells you a lot about a person. Whether it is, I have a few people that go like, "Oh, I like being told feedback right in front of the whole entire group," and as soon as they tell me that, I'm like, but I don't think that's true. But for me, just asking how they like their feedback being given to them. That's one of my favorite questions alongside just what culture are they looking for, right? Sometimes when I ask them, what culture are you looking for in our department? It could go two ways, right? I've had some of the team members that go like, oh, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z because I didn't get it here. And they start trash talking about wherever they come from. And that starts waving those red flags. Whereas I have some other people that tell me true, actual, valuable information. And I'm like, okay. And I feel like that does tell you a lot about a person.
Nice, awesome. Thank you very much. I love the feedback question as well. Funny enough, I was just chatting with a leader regarding this question, and one of their favorite questions was for males, they ask, what car part would you be and why? And for females, they ask, what purse would you be and why? To learn a little bit more about their personality. And I was like, dang, if someone ever asks me that, I don't know much about cars personally, so I would be stuck on it. But feedback
The
is a
followers
great
are
one.
always good too. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Now, before we do close off our hotline, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to call in and pick Raphael's brain, be our guest, Gary has entered the chat. Gary says, how you consider a program, how do you consider a program went well, even though there's a bump during the event? There may be a guest, uh, the guest may or may not know about them. So, how do you consider a program goes well, even if there's a bump in the event that the guest may know about or may not?
Um, so I like to look for feedback when it comes to the events that we host, right? But not in a way of like as if I'm asking for a tip, right? Or going right to their faces and being like, "Hey, how did we do?" I do it through conversation. So as soon as the whole entire event is done, you usually can have that feeling yourself whether something went well or something felt rushed or something not. But really, just looking at the reaction of how the people leave the room and seeing how they go ahead and what's the engagement that they have between each other, right? Are they smiling when they leave, or are they looking at each other like, yo, what just happened right now? But usually here at the ranch, what I do is I go over to the group leader and I'm like, hey, just thank you for joining us. And based on that conversation, sometimes they're truthful and they tell me, hey, this is what I liked about the event. This is what I feel like you should have fixed. Or sometimes they're just completely where I think that something went completely wrong. They're just like, oh, this was probably the best thing, right? And it really, you never get away from that feeling whether something goes right or wrong. When you know that something feels rushed or something along those lines. But what I like to say is that when you're hosting a great event, you feel that it's a great event, right? You get that confidence boost right after. When something went wrong, but then they still had fun and they still look like they had the time of their lives, right? That's when you take that moment to just perfect it for next time. So for me, I just go based on a feeling and based on just the conversation at the end with either the group leader or just a random person that attended that activity.
Oh, most certainly. Nice, nice, nice. Thank you very much for adding that context there. Taylor, you have your hand up. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, no, so I had a question. I had the question about the red flags in particular. You said that when you're looking on the resume, it's like if you see somebody changing positions every 6 to 9 months, it's a red flag. But I personally, when I'm working for organizations, I find myself switching roles within the organization. Like if I mastered, if you're working restaurant, if I mastered the line. I'd want to like go somewhere else to front of house. Is that as problematic or is that
No,
something?
no, no. So I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure I said this earlier, but if I didn't, so when it's within the organization, that is not a red flag at all, right? Because if not, I would be the biggest red flag. I'm not sure if you were here when we first joined in the meeting, but within 5 years of my role, I went from a lifeguard to a lead guard to a supervisor. Then I joined corporate offices, right? I was junior operations trainer. Then I changed a role to operations trainer. That's already five. Then I went back to activities and then did a water park, and then now resort experience. So that's about eight different roles that I did within the organization, all within 5 years. But again, it was within the organization, right? I didn't see myself here, so I went there. I worked hard enough to get to this other promotion. So if it's within the organization, yes. But what stands up as a red flag for me, it's when you start seeing 6 months, 5 months here, and they're all different organizations, are all completely different. Like one of them would be a food and beverage chain, and then the other one would be a hospitality chain, and then it just randomly drops into like a sales chain, right? But that doesn't necessarily, as I mentioned earlier, just stop someone from getting an opportunity. It just starts waving the red flag, but then during conversation, there might be an excuse for it, right? Perhaps it is that they had changes in their personal lives where they're relocating from different places, and those were the opportunities given to them. Or perhaps it was usually I've gotten more on the negative side of like, yeah, I didn't do anything, and then I do a reference call, and they're like, yeah, no, this person was X, Y, and Z. But to answer your question, when it's within the same organization, it's not a red flag. It usually, if it would be, I would be the biggest red flag.
Awesome. And to add on that, I would say if we recognize that yes, there is 9 months and then different change and 9 months and a different change. However, it's an upward trajectory. For example, you've done back of house and you went from cook to etc. And then now you're doing front of house and then now you have a lead position. That is tremendous, right? Um, More so as long as the individual believes they've made the most out of that opportunity, they're excited, they did the experience, they're happy with it, and they just want to obtain that next challenge. That's awesome. And I think through the interview process itself, you'll be able to shine that light to ensure that the interviewer understands. So thank you so much, Taylor, for chiming in and asking that question. Now, as we get ready to navigate off, folks, the hotline is still open. So we have Dominic, Andrew, Gary, Brooke. We still have Lisa Lendon on and Taylor. So if any of you folks would like to chime on in to pick Raphael's brain as our guest speaker this evening, please be our guest. And while we wait, I do also want to thank you all for joining us. I know our schedules are hectic, especially as we start Easter, or not Easter, but April. I understand how insane it is to make some time, and we can't thank you enough for making an hour out of your day to sit here and listen to our RecNet Hotline of the Month. So, folks, if we don't have any other questions, it looks like that is all. Registration opens tomorrow. Yes. Gary, thank you for sending this message while we have this opportunity and for the live recording. Registration for this year's conference in November starts tomorrow, April 10th. So check out our website and be the first to register online as we are so excited to go to Illinois. Looks like Brooke says, thank you very much. Dominic says there's nothing he can think of from Austin, Texas. Thank you for tuning in all the way from Austin. Lisa says, thank you so much. Great information. All righty. Looks like we're ending the call now. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you
Thank you
all.
all.
Raphael, thank you very much for being our guest speaker. We look forward to seeing you all next month on RecNet's Hotline.
See you guys. Have a beautiful night.